Do you enjoy night fishing? Where the lake is quiet and the moonlight sparkles on the water. But behind that stillness, there might be terrifying secrets waiting for you. Welcome to Fishing Horror Stories, where chilling tales of fishing will make you think twice before casting your line again. Today, our channel brings you 5 horror stories from the world of fishing, including Story 1. Whispers Beneath the Water. Fish that not only thrash about, but also whisper ancient secrets from the depths below. Story 2. The Fish That Follows. A small fish keeps returning until the entire lake is filled with identical creatures. Story 3. Light Beneath the River. A strange light and something massive stirring in the river, forcing the fisherman to flee and never return. Story 4. Depths of Dread. The Lake no one returns from. A mysterious lake deep in the woods, where anyone fishing feels an unsettling presence lurking beneath the surface. Story 5. Moonlit Phantom Fisherman. A man without a shadow under the moonlight, disappearing without a trace right before your eyes. Make sure to listen until the end to discover the scariest parts of these fishing tales, and don't forget to share your own fishing horror story in the comments below if you've ever experienced one. Story 1. Whispers Beneath the Water. That night, the night was so still that except for the soft wind that brushed its face across the water's surface, one could hear no noise. Tranquil, the lake was just the perfect reflection of the full moon above. I sat there fishing for quite a number of hours without much success, when all of a sudden, the line tugged really hard. A thrilling sensation ran through the veins. Perhaps this would be the big catch. As I pulled in, I found not just one fish, but a whole school had been hooked and were struggling fiercely. Their slimy bodies shone under the moonlight. The gray scales reflected like so many pieces of broken glass. I had never had such a big catch in my life. Yet something did not feel right. I had taken them off the hook, and they ceased their squirming about, merely lying in the grass, staring up at me, open-eyed, when I heard this awkward, soft sound. I thought at first that maybe I was hallucinating, or rather more believably, the wind whistling through some bush or another nearby. Closer listening proved otherwise. The fishes could talk. They created cacophony, some very ancient language that my brain couldn't decipher. It sounded more like the whisperings of several voices, rather than anything which could bear a resemblance to the sound of a language. These cadences flowed from their mouths, not loud, just enough to feel the life in each word. I listened and tried to make out to catch every word, but it was a series of mysterious sounds, bringing up in me an indescribable feeling. Not fear, but only perplexity, as if I was listening to some conversation I was not supposed to hear. Though I couldn't understand anything from this feeling, I managed to perceive that what the fish were telling each other had to be a greater truth. They were no longer fish. I froze. My quivering hands stared at them. After some time, the murmurs stopped. 2 seconds later, fishes stared at me and struggled furiously, freeing themselves from my hands to fall directly back into the lake. One by two, in order, they disappeared within the water without leaving any trace of their existence. And the lake was still again, as if none of it had happened. I rose on my feet. My mind went tumbling as I tried to make something out of it. What the mystery voices spoke, the meaning I would most probably never know. One thing, however, was clear. The next time I caught fish, I wouldn't want them to talk. Story 2. The Fish That Follows. That day, I caught a small fish no bigger than the size of my then open palm, so I have to take the hook out and let him back in the lake. Just a small fish, I said, and I let this one have the opportunity to grow. I knew there were bigger fish within this lake, and I threw my line into the water at another spot, awaiting better luck. But in a few minutes the line jerked again, and heave-ho, out came, I couldn't believe it, the same little fish again. Same scales, same size. There was just no mistaking it. A little perplexed at this, but thinking maybe this must be one of those freak coincidences since the lake was so large, I once again pulled the hook out and set it free once more. I threw my line quite otherwise and much farther off, and this time held it for some length of time. Again the line vibrated, and on pulling up, there it was again. By now, a kind of misgiving had begun to overtake me. It was so still in the night that I could hardly hear the water lashing softly against the shore. But the very sense of the moonlight reflecting from the lake gave me that sensation of somebody watching me. I dropped the fish in again, this time a little roughly, then changed my position. Whichever part of the lake I sat and fished, from whichever corner, the same small fish came after each pull. Some sort of sick joke it was. That is not all, for the surface started to boil with sprays gradually, and fishes started jumping out of the water one after another, even more terrible. All of them were the same. They are not different fishes, which are the same with that little one I caught for the first time. Dozens, then hundreds of the same fish jumping from the water and sparkling under the moon, their empty eyes all fixed on me. I flung my line down, too afraid to fish anymore. Brains told me the whole lake teased me, driving me to the edge of panic. My heart was pounding, and I knew of nothing else to be done but to rise and run for home with all my speed. The splashing sounds behind my back all sounded like that one school of fish chasing me, sticking to my presence. I have never returned to that lake again, because I know that if ever I go there, that fish will always be there, waiting for me as if all of this had never actually happened. Story 3. Light Beneath the River. That night, deep into the woods, I went fishing in a river, unlike on the lake, because this place had a current of deep coldness. Few people came to this place, but it is just that appealed to me. Silent times save for the crickets chirping and the water lapping softly against the shores at times. Everything was okay until I spotted this little light shimmering under the water surface. Really did I stop, peering for a better look with my eyes asquint. It wasn't moonlight, nor reflection from a star. The light was deep inside the water. The first thing I thought was that somebody might be diving, but then I remembered this river was quite deep, and that on my way here I didn't see traces of anybody. It came toward me, as though something was getting bigger. The pale white glow overspread, illuminating its surroundings. A shiver actually started to run up my back, because it wasn't any flashlight illuminated, far too bright, far too strange. I immediately started reeling in my line, trying to make no noise while hurrying. All of a sudden, the water directly under my feet started to churn. The previously still water no longer still, but as if something big stirred from beneath, sending ripples down the length of the stream. Foaming, bubbling, small waves kept clashing against the shore. The glow beneath the water brightened, giving light into the place around about as daylight, and yet I could see nothing beneath it. I just couldn't stand one more second standing there. I did a turn, left all the gear behind, took my flashlight and started to run. My heart was going, every step echoing with the water sound, and it sounded like something big was rising behind me. I could just feel it, just about to break the surface, ready to take me down into the river's depths. What that light was, or what stirred that water that night, I never knew. I had never gone back to that river, for once you've seen that light under the water, you know it's a place no human ever is meant to go. Story 4. The Lake. No one returns from. I went to this lake deep in the woods to fish all by myself. It wasn't my first time night fishing, but there is something different with this lake. It is way out. Barely anyone goes because it is kind of hard to reach. The whole area has this weird, still feeling like even the trees themselves are holding their breath. But the fish? Supposedly huge. That's all I cared about. I cast my line out, as was normal, and well. That's when things started to get weird. Instead of the line stopping, like normal, it just kept going, like I was casting into a bottomless pit. I stared at it. the line stretching out into the dark water, and I couldn't even see where it was touching the surface anymore. I have never seen anything like that. I thought maybe that I had caught something, but it didn't feel heavy. It was this weird, weightless drag. I just waited a few more minutes, watching the ripples fade, but nothing happened. After a while, I got spooked and decided to reel it in. As I started cranking the handle, something felt off. The line was pulling heavier, but not heavier in a good way, you know? It wasn't like I caught a fish or anything like that. It was cold, almost freezing, slick, wet, but wrong. The more that came in, the more I realized the line was coated in some thick black mud oozing like tar. My hands started to shake, but I kept reeling. The further I got, the colder the line became. The feeling of it was like pulling it up from some frozen pit. The mud was now everywhere, on my hands, dripping down the line. Then it hit me. The smell. It was as though something had died a very long time ago, something that had no business being disturbed. And there I wished to cut the line, but I didn't. I couldn't. Something in me needed to see it through. When I finally got the hook close enough to see, there was no fish, just more mud. But then the water in front of me started to bubble, like something was rising from the depths. Slowly, a dark shape started to form just under the surface. I couldn't make out what it was, but it was big, and it was moving. That was sufficient for me. I dropped the rod, packed as quickly as I could, and bolted. I didn't bother reeling in the remainder. I haven't returned since, and I honestly don't intend to. Whatever is in that lake, no fisherman should tamper with it. Story 5. Moonlit Phantom Fisherman. It is one of my favorite places for fishing, a lake deep in the forest with which I grew up. The moon had been full that night. Thus, its reflection in the water began to be sharp and clear. Everything was like it usually would be until suddenly, I saw another man about tens of meters from me fishing. I remembered it was one of those places that are seldom frequented, and none of them had the time to fish at night as I did. Perhaps, I mused, someone did, and gave it no more thought after that. The man sat very still, his fishing rod plunged into the silent waters without even a sound. Yet something in it made me ill at ease. Under that bright moon, everything cast a shadow, trees, the fishing pole in my hands, even the chair I sat on, but that man didn't have any trace of a shadow. I stopped, my eyes fixed upon him, my heart racing very fast. My rational brain kept telling me that it was just the angle of view or some sort of unevenly cast moonlight, but my instincts didn't seem to like it one bit. Not being able to explain it, I rose and walked closer for a better view. Yet, with each step I took, I felt myself more and more as if I were walking into a nightmare. The instant I came within perhaps 5 feet of him, this fellow abruptly stood up. Not a sound, no breathing, no water, no earthly sound beneath him. In less than a second, faster than I could say one word, let alone shout a greeting, he vanished. Poof. Like that man had never been there at all. No footprints, no echoes. I have stood frozen and stared at that empty space where he had just been. No footprints, no signs to prove he had been there. I tried to tell myself it was some trick of the darkness, but somewhere deep inside, I knew what I saw was real. That night, no more bit. I packed up and went home, heavy with the feeling that this lake had somehow changed, and I would never fish there alone again. Thank you all for listening to my stories. If you enjoyed them, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos.